Well, thank you very much for staying with us here on The Full View. Now, Boris Johnson is assembling his cabinet, but apart from the high-profile ministers, he will also rely on a number of key advisors behind the scenes. Outside the cabinet, the most eye-catching appointment of the day so far is that of Dominic Cummings as senior advisor to the new Prime Minister. For more now, we cross live to our correspondent in the UK, Holly Hudson. Hi, good evening to you, Holly. Well, quite interesting so far. Chris Grayling, Mordaunt, Fox and Clark, for example, are all out.
Yes, they are. Boris Johnson has already got to work within just a few hours of officially taking office. The 10 ministers now have gone, including the latest, the Community Secretary, James Brokenshire, as he sort of forms his cabinet for modern times, as he puts it. There's set to be a record number of women, a record number of ethnic minorities, according to Boris Johnson. But what will be most interesting and what everyone is wanting to see is exactly how many Brexiteers make up this cabinet, as that will signal exactly the direction the Brexit he is going to pursue. And as we understand, it's set to be around sort of 2/3 Brexiteers, 1/3 Remainer, to try and that sort of signifies as well the split and what he's trying to manage within his own party and within who he's trying to please. But we have seen as well the potential appointment of Dominic Cummings, which is potentially controversial. Dominic Cummings was the head of the Vote Leave campaign. Boris Johnson, of course, the figurehead of that campaign. So that may be a signal of the direction he's looking to go in. We also heard from Boris Johnson earlier as Prime Minister for the first time on the steps of number 10. He gave a rousing, if not sort of dramatic speech signalling his vision for Brexit. He said the buck stops with him. Forget the backstop, the buck stops here.
All right, he is a Brexiteer. So does his appointment raise the possibility, Holly, you spoke about it very briefly there, but does his appointment raise the possibility of a no-deal Brexit?
Definitely. Boris Johnson's central pledge throughout his whole leadership campaign has been that do or die, we will leave the European Union here in Britain on the 31st of October with or without a deal. During his speech he spoke today, he spoke of how much spirit he has and how much spirit Britain has in terms of reaching out to the European Union and trying to get this deal. He does want to try and renegotiate with Brussels first of all, but he says if the fact is that we are forced to take no deal, that is what he will do, as he really wants to stick to this deadline. And he actually suggested that if Brussels won't negotiate with us, then that's what we'll have to do. He even maybe threatened the 39 billion figure. That's the sort of divorce payment that the UK would have to pay the EU. He threatened that essentially by saying that we might well take that away if we have no deal. And we've heard a few comments from the EU. Guy Verhofstadt, one of the EU's negotiators, saying that the withdrawal agreement is again still on the table. Only the political declaration, which is sort of the path that the EU and the UK will now take, could be more ambitious. But he said that threatening no deal is very bad for the UK to do.
Well, Holly, just looking at some of the headlines from around the world in the run-up to his appointment, you know, some of his critics describing him as useless, but he's obviously very popular within the Conservative Party. I mean, give us a bit of the backstory here. How did Boris Johnson become so popular, and rising to this office of being the Prime Minister, yet you've got so many of his critics, on the other hand, who've also described him as useless?
Yes, well, the fact that Boris Johnson is Prime Minister, that sentence in itself, many would have never have thought would have been uttered a few years ago, let alone a few months ago. As many, he's always craved this job. He's always been open about this. This is his ambition, and this is what he's wanted. He's wanted this top job very desperately and been very open about that. But sort of everybody ruled him out, particularly the people behind me here at Westminster a while ago, because of his gaffes, his indiscretions, his scrapes, his diplomatic errors that he's made. Often, many people thought there would be no chance that he would become Prime Minister, but yet here he is, and he really is a Marmite figure, as we say here in the UK. You either love him or you hate him, but there is something that would be said, has to be said about the fact that it's hard to ignore Boris Johnson. He's potentially the most famous face, previously famous face, that's headed into Downing Street, most well-known politician that's already gone into the top job here. So the fact that he is very difficult to ignore, that he has got that sort of celebrity status in a way, that personality, that that charisma is what his supporters would argue will get people around, will unite the country, as they put it. He's managed to unite the party in a way, to get him here, obviously winning the votes of the Conservative Party membership. But it's not just the party he's got to convince now, it's the country.
Well, just before we wrap it up, Holly, of course, he's been compared to the US President Donald Trump. Of course, the sentiments that they've shared on minorities are similar. Is it a fair comparison to make?
Well, yes, we heard Donald Trump yesterday congratulating his friend Boris Johnson and saying that he is called Britain's Trump and that people over here like him and that Boris Johnson will do a good job. So he thinks that Boris Johnson will do a good job of Brexit. But many here see that endorsement as a sign of what kind of Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be. Obviously, Trump, a very controversial figure himself here in the UK. And I would add that there were protests outside of Buckingham Palace when Boris Johnson went to meet the Queen earlier today. And even at the start of his speech outside Downing Street, some of it was drowned out by the shouts of protesters outside. So in a way that signifies exactly how controversial Boris Johnson is as well. So in that sense, comparisons can be drawn and it will be very difficult, and well, Boris Johnson will have to tread very carefully with regards to the special relationship in how it's viewed here and of course how Donald Trump views it from across the pond.
Holly Hudson, our UK correspondent, joining us live there, of course, talking to us about the latest political developments. Of course, there, a new cabinet, quite a number of individuals stepping down, Penny Mordaunt, Fox and Clark as well, Greg Clark, that is, stepping down, of course, from their positions. They were certainly across to Holly Hudson over the next couple of days as that story continues to develop.